Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Overview of Benefits for Veterans of Brain Injury. I am Bridget Aliaga, Brain Injury Training and Services Program Coordinator here at the Association. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, a few housekeeping details. Because of limited time, we ask that you please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. During the Q&A session, questions can be submitted via the question text box. The text box option should be visible to you on the GoToWebinar toolbar on your desktop. If you are having trouble viewing this option, please contact Citrus Tech Support at 800-263-6317. Again, that number is 800-263-6317. This number should also be visible to you on your toolbar. Our speaker will do her best to answer any questions in the order in which they are received. Any questions she is unable to address may be submitted via the email to the Association. We will be recording this webinar session and plan to post it along with the presentation slides to our website, www.bianys.org. Information about contacting the association and viewing the webinar will be provided in a follow-up email after the presentation has ended. My contact information will also be included in those follow-up messages. Before I turn the microphone over to our presenter, let us begin with a quick poll to see who is in our audience today. Please take a moment to answer the question. Okay, I'm launching the poll. Hold on one second. Everyone just take a moment to answer that. I'll give you guys a few more seconds. Okay, it looks like everyone has answered, so I'm going to close that poll. Okay, it looks like the majority of you are healthcare professionals or caseworkers. Oh, I'm sorry, the majority of you actually are brain injury program affiliated, and then the rest of you are healthcare professionals or caseworkers. A few of you work in a school setting or are an individual with a brain injury or a family member that has a brain injury. So looks like we have a fairly diverse group today. That's always great to see. I would like to thank all of you again for your participation and helping us to spread the word about our monthly webinars. Your support is truly appreciated. It is with sincere pleasure that I introduce our presenter today, Kimberly Strauchon Verner. Kim is an attorney with Herzog Law Firm in Albany, New York, where she concentrates her practice in the areas of elder law, special needs planning, estate and tax planning, estate administration, and real estate. With 15 years of legal experience, Kim has worked in a private practice, clerked at counsel's office for the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, and prior to law school, served on a New York State Department of Health task force for housing individuals with traumatic brain injuries. Kim, good afternoon.
Hi there. I'm really pleased to be doing this presentation today, and I appreciate the invitation. Today we're going to be talking about a number of topics. We're going to be going over statistics and brain injury overview in the military and sort of why this topic is so important. We're going to talk about specific benefits that are available through the veteran system, then government benefits that are available at the federal level, benefits and services that are available at the state level. We're going to talk a little bit about how to pay for care, because if any of you are in this field working with any type of a person with a disability, the type of pay often dictates the type of care. And we'll talk about the other resources that are available through the Brain Injury Association of New York State. So to sort of give you a background about why we're talking about this, we're going to give a summary of someone I read about. He's someone named Victor Delgado. He is a veteran who was involved in an accident while he was in the Middle East. And he actually has a blog where he's explained all of this, so we're not giving away any sort of details. He and his wife have worked very hard to sort of get their story out there. He was working with his squad, and a roadside bomb hit his armored vehicle. So he never had anything hit him directly. There was a bomb. It blew up, it hit his vehicle. But the force of the bomb caused concussive shock waves, pressure changes, and whiplash. So he knew he was shook up, but he sort of continued to go on for a day or two. But it took a day or two to figure out that there was really something going on. He started to feel different, and what his wife was noticing when they were Skyping is that he was confused and overwhelmed. And initially, he was having some speech issues. As she sort of joked, as they were trying to Skype back and forth, and she thought maybe it was a language issue with Skype. And so she switched from English to Spanish to see if that would help. But no, he was having trouble keeping up with the conversation. He was tired. He was lethargic. And eventually, they sort of put things together that maybe he had a brain injury. So his wife had sent information to his sergeant with a list of different symptoms, and the sergeant said, yes, this fits him perfectly. He was then diagnosed. They brought him to a veterans hospital, and he was diagnosed with a moderate traumatic brain injury. And again, he was never hit himself. He was in a vehicle that was hit. So 18 months later, after getting extensive therapies and treatment through the VA system, he is still experiencing speech issues, some processing issues, meaning he's having trouble understanding language or keeping up with language. He's someone who used to run 8 miles a day, and now he still gets weak walking short distances, and there's been some personality changes. So this is sort of typical of someone that they're seeing now through the veterans system and the type of symptoms that they are seeing. So why are we talking about this? Because violent blows to the head or being around a blast, which is causing blast injury, is now considered the signature injury of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. It's really sort of the hallmark injury they're seeing. And between 2000 and 2010, there were more than, depending on which website you go to, between 200,000 and 250,000 service members have been diagnosed with traumatic brain injury. The thing that shocked me is that the number of service members with brain injuries is 5 times greater than the number of service members who are amputees. And again, before doing the research, when I was thinking of all these explosions and things going off, I sort of thought it was going to be a different type of injury. I sort of expected it was going to be more arms and legs, but they're finding 5 times the number of people are experiencing brain injuries. And these symptoms are ranging from cognitive to emotional and to physical. And when you're part of the armed services, if you're a veteran, if you're in one of the branches in the military, they're putting 4 different classifications. They're saying it could be a mild TBI, a moderate, severe, or penetrating. So why is this becoming so prevalent? Why is this happening more than it used to in the past? Well, one is there's more blast-type devices being deployed, and it's sort of the nature of warfare these days. It's not 2 lines of people lining up and shooting at one another. It's more of these IEDs and more blasts. The other thing that's happening is that the service members are coming in with better armor, personal armor, and the vehicles are stronger. So the mortality rate is down. These better armors are causing people to not die from the explosions, but the mortality rate or the death rate is down, but the traumatic brain injuries are up because these are the type of injuries that in prior wars, even 15, 20, 30 years ago, more people would have been dying from these injuries, and now more people are living. From the research, we're discovering that some percentage of them are not just from these blast-type devices, but they're also finding that some percentage is from vehicle crashes, from training exercises, and even sports injuries that are happening for the military when they're not deployed. So it's sort of the same thing that they're seeing with football teams and people playing soccer, that's sort of now a portion of what's happening with the military also. So when we're looking at the types of services that are available, we're going to break them down into services that are available through the Veterans Administration, general federal benefits, and then things that are available at the state level. So one of the most important components for someone who has been injured is veterans' disability compensation. And how do you get this compensation? Well, veterans with a service-related disability can qualify for up to, that should be $100 in monthly benefits. And the amount that you might get really depends on a number of categories we'll go over. But there's two things you have to meet initially just to qualify for any of this disability compensation. One, you have to have a service-related disability. And when they're determining the service-related disability, they're going to assess a percentage to it. Is it a 5% disability, a 10% disability, a 30% disability, 90% disability, 100% disability? And that's a very important number in determining what kind of benefits that you'll get and the amount of benefits. And you must be discharged under other than dishonorable conditions. So as long as you have, as long as you were not dishonorably discharged, you can qualify for veterans' disability compensation. And that's going to be a payment that is ongoing. That's going to help pay for care and pay for living expenses. When we're looking at these compensation rates, the amount a service member may receive depends on a number of things. One is the level or percentage of a disability. So when we were talking before about 10%, 20%, 30%, there's actual charts, and they're easy to look up through if you Google the Veterans Administration or the Department of Defense. They would go on for pages because of all the different parameters. But the first thing you would look up is what level of disability is someone. Someone who has a 10% or a 20% disability is only going to receive a small amount. Someone who's at the 70, 80, 90, 100% is obviously going to be at a higher level. And then they also look at the number of dependents, the ages of them. So some of the factors they're looking at is how severe is the disability? Was there a loss of limb? That increases the compensation. When we're talking about dependents, do you have a spouse? Do you have children? Do you have dependent parents? And the charts will go through and you find out what is your family composed of. So if it's just you and your spouse, it's a certain amount. If it's you and your spouse and minor children, you get obviously more. You and your spouse, dependent parents, that again would be more than if you're just alone. And they look at, do any of your dependents have a disability themselves? So is your spouse deemed disabled? Are any of your children deemed disabled? And this all factors in to the amount of compensation. Now, along with sort of having a monthly compensation check, there are certain travel expenses that they can reimburse for as sort of under a form of compensation. And these expenses include traveling to the VA for care, if it's local or if you have to go for distance travel for treatment, even traveling just to go and apply for benefits. You know, there's a certain mileage and it gets changed every year. Before we go on to other federal benefits, I wanted to make you aware of one of the other very important sort of parts of the veteran system is something called the Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center. Sometimes just DVBI. And these are really the centers of where people are who are veterans or current service members are receiving their care. And they're broken down into geographic regions in 4 parts of the country, but also there are brain injury centers available and treatment centers available outside of the country in Europe and then down in the islands also. And what kind of care is available through these centers? Well, part of what we'll be talking about is the type of care you can receive depends on who is paying for it. But at these centers, they can do anything from neuroimaging, neurological services, neuropsychological testing, laboratory, psychiatric services, visual services. They can do all sorts of occupational therapy, rehab nursing, physical therapy, speech, cognitive therapy, depending on where they think your level of need is. And it goes back to, is it mild, is it moderate, is it severe? And for some of these, it even goes back to which branch of service are you in. When we talk a little bit about Tricare and some of the ways of paying for this, Tricare has case managers and systems that are set up in different parts of the country. And depending on which branch of the military you're in, they may send you to a different hospital, a different service, or a different hospital, or maybe inpatient care. It may be outpatient care, but it's sort of all based in geographic regions. Now, when we're talking about other federal benefits, what you can get from the veterans is only a piece of the puzzle. It's important to keep in mind sort of the other benefits that are available to anybody who has a brain injury. And so the first thing we're going to talk about briefly is if someone is a veteran, they can still be eligible for, and in many cases it's a good idea to apply for, sort of the standard federal benefits that anyone with a brain injury would apply for, including Social Security Disability, also known as SSD, Supplemental Security Income, also known as SSI, Medicare, and Medicaid. And if you've been in this field for a while, you know that these programs are somewhat linked in a way that makes it, unfortunately, confusing for many people because the names are very similar. But SSD is linked to Medicare. SSI is linked to Medicaid. So if you've been receiving Social Security Disability for at least 2 years, you automatically qualify for Medicare. If you qualify for SSI, Supplemental Security Income, you will automatically qualify for Medicaid in your own state. And the cheat sheet I've always done with that is SSI has the I in it. Medicaid has the extra I in it. So for about 2 years, I had to keep a sticky next to my desk to try to remember which one goes to which. So when we're talking about these Social Security benefits that are out there, not everyone realizes that even if you're receiving veterans benefits, service members may apply for Social Security Disability and SSI. An important thing to note is if someone was disabled as a veteran and it happened while on active duty after October 1st, 2001, there's an expedited processing of this disability claim. And so you're going to want to note, if you are a case manager or someone who's helping, or a family member, helping someone apply for Social Security Disability or SSI benefits, that you want to note on there so they can help with the expedited processing. When can you apply for these benefits? Well, you can apply while you're still sort of active duty in military status or after you've been discharged, because many people are still considered active duty when they're going through any of these therapies. And so that's not going to stop you from, having this definition of being active duty doesn't necessarily stop you from receiving Social Security Disability. And for those who are not as familiar with these programs, in order to qualify for either SSD or SSI, there's one test that works for both of them, and you have to meet the federal definition of disability. And for that, it means you are unable to do substantial work because of a medical condition. And this medical condition may have lasted or is expected to have lasted for at least 1 year or, unfortunately, result in your death. So we're going back to this unable to do substantial work and this definition of disability. That's where it can get a little confusing if someone is still deemed active duty. But if someone is still labeled active duty and getting therapies and going through one of the VA centers and they're in inpatient treatment, they still may qualify as disabled because they're not earning. They're not out working. They're getting paid, or they're getting paid compensation, but it's because of the disability. It's not because they're out doing a physical job. For those who regularly work in the Social Security or disability benefit area, or have clients who are on that, the Social Security website has some wonderful resources on there. And one thing that I found is very, very helpful is they have a specific publication that's just disabled benefits for wounded warriors. And it walks you through the steps and the information. State veterans benefits. Now, when we're talking about state veterans benefits, we're sort of breaking things down in a couple different ways. What are the different things that are available? What are the different things that are available at the state level? And this could be going through a couple different places. Most states have a division of Veterans Affairs. And these divisions of Veterans Affairs are going to have a list of benefits that we're going to talk about in a moment. So through New York State, there are, and I understand not all of you who are listening are New York State residents or working with folks from New York State. I'm just going to use this as an example. But if you go to your own state's Division of Veterans Affairs, they'll go through their own list of what might be available. And one is housing benefits, just subsidized housing that might be available. One is financial assistance. So there are additional loans and grants that are available for someone who wants to go back to school after they've had a traumatic brain injury and they're a veteran. There are specific employment benefits and training programs that are available just to benefits. There are property tax exemptions, which is a really big one in New York State with the level of property taxes that we have, that you need to just prove that you're a veteran and you have a reduction in your property taxes. There are supplemental burial allowances listed. And here's one that, as a sort of special needs planning attorney and an elder law attorney, I get people asking about all the time: veterans' homes. Most states have one or more veterans' homes that can have anywhere from 50 to 250 beds that are available for long-term care for veterans. So I get this question all the time from veterans who say, well, I'm not sure if I need to do long-term care planning because I can just go to the veterans' home. The truth of the matter is, for many states, actually getting a bed in a veteran's home for long-term care, the equivalent of a nursing home, or even getting on the nursing home level of care floor at a veteran's hospital, is a little bit like winning the lottery. You have to have your assets lined up the right way, and you just happen to be applying at a time that there was a bed. There aren't that many compared to the needs of the individuals out there. So although there are beds in New York State and in other states, I wouldn't rely on that as your sort of final type of long-term care. When we're going back to talking about state benefits, one of the most important places to look for services is to contact the Brain Injury Association of your own state. Almost every state has a Brain Injury Association, and in fact, this whole webinar is being presented by the Brain Injury Association of New York State. There is a national Brain Injury Association. If you call that number, they call the 1-800 number. They're sort of going to direct you towards the local or regional Brain Injury Association that's going to help you out. In New York, the Brain Injury Association of New York actually has a program that they work directly with. It's called the TBI Training at Military Veterans Service Project. So the Brain Injury Association is working with veterans directly, and they're working with the New York State Department of Health to sort of work in conjunction to get information out about services that are available in New York State. How to pay for care. Well, like many of the services and many of the folks that we work with that have any type of an injury or any type of a disability, and people who have a brain injury, regardless of whether a veteran or not a veteran, how you pay has a big control over the type of services that you can get. So the first thing that we talk about is how do you pay for care? Regardless if you're a veteran or not a veteran, one option is to privately pay at a civilian private rehabilitation center. If you have consumers that you're working with, veterans that you're working with, that have resources to pay privately, they have the ability to seek services from any of the treatment modalities, from any doctor they want, from any therapist that they want. It's really sort of the best option, but it's not available to most. So the next is looking at private health insurance. And this often comes into play when someone is a veteran, but they also had another job. So say someone who's in the National Guard or someone who's in the reserves who had a private job, they had private health insurance, and through the reserves, through the Guard, they went over to Afghanistan, Iraq, over across the pond, so to speak, and then they became injured. When they come back, they're going to have the option of working through the veteran systems, or they can work through their own private insurance. And we'll talk in a moment about specific therapies and what can be covered, but that often gives you better coverage. The next is looking at Medicare and Medicaid. And as we mentioned before, one can receive Medicare if they're receiving Social Security, disability, or if they retired and they're just getting Social Security. Medicare doesn't care about how much money you have in the bank. They just care about the type of benefits that you've received and how much you've sort of paid into their system. The opposite of that is Medicaid. And Medicaid can cover quite a bit depending on which state you're in and what type of services that are available. It so happens that for non-veterans in New York State, Medicare opens the door to some of the best services available through the state because New York State has the Traumatic Brain Injury Waiver Program, which helps with everything from going through rehabilitation to cognitive therapies of sort of all sorts through OT, PT services, and then the transition into helping people get services in the community, whether that's subsidized housing, whether it's case management, adaptive equipment, and sort of putting things into place so people can live an independent life after they've been through the rehab process. But Medicaid is an asset, an income-dependent program. So in New York, with every state, they care about how much you have in the bank and how much your income is. In New York, you can't have countable resources of more than $14,400, plus some exempt things. You can't have a car, you can't have a house, but there's sort of a but with the house. And the income that you're allowed to have depends on which program you're in and where you are. While you're living in a rehab center, basically all of your income, but $50 a month, is going to go towards the cost of your care. If you're able to move back out into the community, they let you, if you're an individual, they let you keep around $900, give or take. And if you're married, the rules are a little different again. Again, Medicaid has sort of, after private pay, believe it or not, Medicaid is the payer that's going to pay the most sort of range of services. And then last we come to Tricare. And Tricare is this sort of funny service that's out there just for individuals who are either current active duty, they're retired from the military, or they're sort of in the transition process. So Tricare is often what is paying initially for the care for a veteran with traumatic brain injury. So if someone is still active duty or someone is still considered linked to one of the military systems, they were just injured, they're going through and getting care. Tricare is often the one that's going to be paying for the types of services. They can pay for in-house. They can pay for outpatient. And it sort of depends on where you are in the world when you're injured, where you're coming back to, which hospital you're going to go through. And this is where I was saying Tricare has case managers that helps coordinate care for folks with traumatic brain injury. And they've got centers that they're working with in sort of the Four Corners and then other places in the world. There's been some real criticism, however, with Tricare and what they are willing to pay. And there's been tremendous lobbying over the past years that have finally made some changes. For those who have been in this field, you'll know that cognitive rehabilitation therapy has often been deemed sort of the gold standard or one of the highest levels of achieving results for folks with traumatic brain injury. It's sort of, it's individualized, and it was making news for people who aren't even in the field when the senator out in Arizona was shot, and they were saying she made so much progress because she was undergoing cognitive rehabilitation therapy, which also started to have people poke around in the Tricare system and realized back in 2006, 2007, 2008 that Tricare wasn't paying for this. So it was considered the gold standard for folks outside of the veterans benefit system, but it wasn't available to veterans because Tricare specifically would not pay for it. They said, there's not enough documented evidence that this is going to do enough good. And then they paid for someone to do a study. And their study said, we don't have enough evidence that really shows through their own self-funded study that it's going to do enough good. They refused to pay for care. So there was tremendous lobbying by families, by patients, by doctors, by brain injury associations, through Congress, and then slowly individuals who had enough people backing them was getting Tricare to help pay for private clinics to get this therapy on a one-on-one, sort of a one-off basis. So they weren't making a determination for all folks with brain injury, but if you could get your congressperson, if you could get enough sort of political clout behind you, they were starting to pay for individuals. All of this changed finally in 2012 after what appeared to be about 6 or 7 years of lobbying. And now Tricare is taking a different approach in terms of what they're able to pay, or what they are, I should say, what they're willing to pay. And new regulations came out in March of this year. Tricare actually came up with a new fact sheet called Tricare and Cognitive Rehabilitation Therapy, because if you did a Google search up till then on Tricare and cognitive therapy, every article would be about the investigation that was done, and it looked like they weren't willing to pay for the service that seemed to be the most beneficial. So now it's saying that for service members who are active duty, Tricare is going to pay for services with no out-of-pocket costs. For retired service members, there are services available, but there are co-payments. But they're saying that they will pay for cognitive rehabilitation therapy, but they're not guaranteeing it for others. So the way they're couching it is saying is Tricare covers medical treatments that are proven safe and effective. Some cognitive rehabilitation services have not been fully proven as effective standalone therapy for TBI. So they're saying that they gave an example of sort of more of a fringe type of therapy, equine therapy or horseback riding. They're saying, we're not going to cover this. But they're saying, well, we might cover others. And so this is how they're sort of covering themselves for now. So at least they're taking steps to reach out and cover more services. One of the other interesting things that's happening right now is the Defense Department is realizing that because this is the most prevalent injury that's happening with the service members, they're putting a lot of time and effort and research into this kind of injury. One, looking at how to prevent it, and two, looking at other ways of sort of figuring out what's going on, working with other modalities of treatment, and conducting their own research. So one of the studies that I found, which was really interesting, is they're actually teaming up with the NFL, of all places, to do some joint research. So there's research being done at the veterans hospitals, like Walter Reed Medical Center, using retired and almost retired NFL players who already have symptoms of a brain injury related to their football career. And so they're working together to, in one of these studies, they're looking at certain proteins that they're finding in the blood of the folks who are in the NFL. Because what they're finding is it's not consistent, and you're seeing, for those who are in the field, you're seeing this with your own folks, I'm sure. You can't have a one-on-one correlation of this level of an injury is going to, or sort of physical event, whether it's a blast, whether it's a hit, whether it's a small concussion, whether it's a big concussion, whether things happen just once or over and over again. It's not always this small injury equals this small brain injury. This kind of large injury equals this kind of a moderate to severe brain injury. They're tracking this one particular protein and finding that there are some people who are more susceptible to more severe brain injuries than others, depending on whether this protein, is found in their system or not. And so this is really, they're trying to do this research to find out if certain soldiers down the road are going to be more or less susceptible to, especially with these blast injuries. Because when we're going back to how we first described what a typical injury is, it's not someone being hit with shrapnel. It's really an explosion, a blast that's happening within a certain geographic region. And it's the shock waves, it's the concussive waves, it's the whiplash, it's the being banged around. That's what's causing a majority of these injuries. And what they're finding is that there could be two people who are sustaining the identical sort of concussive impact, but their symptoms down the road are looking very different. And so the Defense Department is doing research related to this. They're working with the NFL, and they're working with the Veterans Administration to sort of team up and come up with better diagnoses, better treatment, and trying to determine who is going to be more or less likely to have a big injury like this, or to have the greater symptoms. So I'm going to pass this back to Bridget, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the Brain Injury Association of New York State. And she's going to open things up so you can ask questions, because this was sort of a quick overview, but I know there'll be topics that people may want more specific information on, and I'm happy to take the questions at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. You shared lots of great information with us today. Just a little information about us before we move on to the question and answer section. We are a statewide nonprofit membership organization that advocates on behalf of individuals with brain injuries and their families. I know Kim mentioned the Brain Injury Association of America. If you're interested in that, I can give you the number, and because I know many of you aren't from New York State, and you can get in contact with your local Brain Injury Association. Can you advance it? There, perfect. And this is just our contact information.
Sorry.
That's okay. This is our contact information if you'd like to get in touch with us or visit our website. That's on there for you. And these are just some additional resources. They're all free. They have to do with concussions, including pamphlets and DVDs. We're also working a lot with concussion management in schools, so if you'd like to get copies of these resources, please contact us. We do have them available electronically on our website as well.
I'm going to put in a plug that they didn't ask me to say. I happened to attend the Brain Injury Association annual conference this past year. They were kind enough to ask me to come and speak for a one hour on a topic, but I couldn't leave. I found so much information, and I found the event so inspiring. Having lunch with many people who were folks who had brain injuries, who clearly had these bonds, these friendships. They were telling me about their experiences, and sometimes they were the folks with the brain injury, or sometimes it was a parent or a caretaker. And just to hear them tell their stories, and just to hear about the research, and to hear the keynote speaker, who this year was just dynamic. If you have the opportunity to come to one of their conferences, especially the annual one, I guarantee it will be well worth your time.
It definitely is. I am actually new here, and I just feel so welcomed. Everyone has been so kind to me. So, if you can make it to a conference, I assure you, you will feel just as welcomed. My experience has been great so far, so, I can't complain. It's a great place.
And they didn't ask me to do that. I felt compelled to say it anyway because I really got that much out of it myself.
Well, thank you. Well, if you do advance to our next slide, we will be hosting our annual conference on June 5th to June 6th in Albany. So just visit our website for more information on that. We would love to see you there. And finally, you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter for news and updates about the association. They're both great tools to stay informed. So we can move on to the question and answer section now. Just a quick reminder, any questions that are not addressed, I encourage you to email to me. I will be happy to get them to Kim. Again, you will receive my contact information in a follow-up email from GoToWebinar. And let's get started. Let's see.
And if people want to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to answer questions that way. I did not put my email address on here, but I can give that out now, which is K Verner, VERNER, at Herzog Law, HERZOGLAW.com. Or if you go to our website and click on my face, I think it links directly to me.
Okay.
That works too.
Perfect.
But I'm happy to answer other questions if people have specific questions.
Yeah, and if anyone has any other questions additionally, you can always contact me, and I will be happy to get that to her. That's not a problem at all. Looks like we only have a few questions. So the first one is there a mechanism for challenging a dishonorable charge? So, for example, if the veteran is later found to have a TBI, which could have been the basis for a behavior resulting in his or her dishonorable charge.
There's always an appeal process for everything in the federal government. The issue is, are you appealing timely? Because if they don't always give you a big window to go back and challenge something, and you absolutely want to work with someone who is an expert at veterans law. It's, their system, their courts, their administrative process is different from everything else. So you can often go to your local legal aid department, and if they don't have someone who's an expert on veterans law there, they can direct you to that. There are private attorneys who can help also, but I'd say first try legal aid because they often, at least one person in every state, has expertise in veterans benefits and appealing determinations. So that might be one place to go.
Great, thank you. And then we have one more question. What organizations or legal representations are available for veterans facing these issues?
Well, it really depends on where you are and what you're looking to do. So if it's, again, if you're going back to sort of the dishonorable discharge, you can find a private attorney. There are also veteran service organizations that can help. With some of these others, when you're looking at compensation, or there's a different benefit that we didn't talk about, because we use it more with our seniors than we do with our folks with brain injury, but it's something called aid and attendance. And it's a benefit that's available to help pay for, so once you've either retired or you've separated from the military and you're still getting a pension or compensation, it's an additional enhancement that can be used to help pay for care in your home or in assisted living. And it's practically the only benefit that helps in New York with assisted living. There are certain categories of attorneys who are allowed to help with this. They have to be certified through the Veterans Administration, or you can go to, there's veterans service organizations that have representatives that can help. And sometimes you can just go to your local, like Veterans of Foreign Affairs, Veterans of Foreign War sort of lodge in your town or community, and they will have the name of someone who can help you sort of apply or get assistance with any of these. So whether it's compensation, whether it's aid and attendance, they can help with that. I also know that there are more and more legal clinics that are popping up that help with specific veterans matters or help veterans. You know, in the Capital Region about a month ago, Albany Law School sponsored a veterans law clinic. So anyone who was a veteran could come in. It was a pro bono clinic, and they help with everything from specific veterans law questions to, you know, if a veteran just needed a new power of attorney or healthcare proxy. So you can contact law schools. You can go through legal aid clinics, the veteran service organizations, or the local VFWs.
Great.
You can also go directly to the VA center, but it's harder to find someone who's a real advocate there. They all try to, but they're all very, very busy.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you for answering that. We have another question. We have an individual who works, looks like she's a TBI Medicaid waiver provider, and they have a great difficulty getting veterans on the waiver due to income restrictions. Is there any way a lawyer can move assets to qualify veterans for Medicaid?
Sure, and it's part of what I do quite a bit, which is dealing with something called a supplemental needs trust. And this is something that works at the state level, the federal level. They exist in New York State and in almost every state in the country. It's a way that you can transfer assets from an individual's name into the special kind of trust for the benefit of a person with a disability. They can't act as their own trustee. They have to have a family member. It can't be a spouse, or a friend, or a not-for-profit acting as the trustee of the trust. And it's set up so things get paid on behalf of the individual, but they never get cash back out of the trust. But you can transfer excess income or excess assets, whatever is necessary to help someone qualify for Medicaid by using one of these trusts. So in order to find someone who could do this, you'd go and find a local elder law attorney and ask for someone who really focuses on special needs planning, and it should work. The caveat is if the person is still in rehabilitation, they've got to be under the age, well, if someone's still at a rehab center, it's a little bit more complicated. These really work better when someone is transitioning out of rehab and into the community, and so you're trying to get them on the TBI waiver, because there's no transfer penalties with the TBI waiver. It's different when you're in the rehab center. You can still qualify. You're just spending all of your income on the cost of the rehab center, and Medicaid picks up the rest.
Great, thank you. We have a few Tricare questions coming up. The first is,
Okay.
you stated Tricare has begun to cover CRT, cognitive rehabilitation therapy, in some instances. Who is providing the CRT and how often are these services being delivered?
Who is providing it? Well, it looks like from my research, Tricare is using their team of service coordinators, and the service coordinators have a list of resources of where they're going to get these services. So if you do a Google search on Tricare, TBI, and then just put case manager, you should be able to come up with their guidebook, and it's broken down into regions. So I was reviewing the one for the Northeast earlier today, and it really did list for the Northeast part of the United States, so the Northeast corner, every medical hospital that's associated with a branch of the armed services. So it listed every VA hospital, and then it went through, if you're in the Army and these are your symptoms or what you're having, this is where you can go. If you were in the Navy, this is what you could get, or where you can go for services. If you were in the Marine Corps, this is where you could sort of go for services. And they list all rehab centers, and then they list state services too. So there's even something that sort of refers back to all of the state plans and the state sort of brain injury programs on that. And it's actually a great resource. So that's where the Tricare case managers go to there. They try to do it in-house, I think to the extent possible. And if they don't, I think they probably have to get special permission to go outside of the veteran system. But that's sort of, it appears that's where they're getting their information as to where to send someone. And it really looked like, if someone needed in-house, or sorry, inpatient TBI services, they're sending them to, the only inpatient place was a hospital in Boston in Northeast. But if they need outpatient services, then there were a greater range of places that they could go. But they weren't going to say specifically how often. The documents aren't going to say how often you could get these therapies through Tricare.
Okay.
I think. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, keep going. I was just going to read the next question.
I think part of that's also advocacy. Like any of these systems, if you have a family member or if you have someone from a service organization that can help you advocate, you don't have to take the first answer for what they're saying. If they're saying they're offering cognitive therapy once a week, but your family thinks this individual, or if you're a case manager and your experience says they need it more than that, you don't have to say yes the first time. There are ways of sort of challenging, appealing, and saying, here's the medical documentation. This is why I think the person needs additional services. Are you going to get it all the time? No. Does it hurt to ask? No. That's just good advocacy.
Great. And then we have an individual who wants to know, what has been your experience with Tricare paying for the only viable treatment for TBI called hyperbaric oxygen therapy?
I have no experience with that, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I really don't know on that. What you may want to do is, again, if you go, and you may just want to call Tricare directly and see if you can get further information on that. The other place that you can go to get information, and we talked about it briefly, is, I'm not finding it. Actually, it's probably going to trip off your tongue faster, Bridget. The Defense and Veteran.
The DVA?
Yeah.
The Department of Veteran Affairs.
Right.
Yes. So.
But it's also the initials DVBIC, the Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center, is a great resource and website where you may be able to get some of this other information also. And they're more of like a national clearinghouse that, again, directs things regionally. But they may be able to give you more specific information about what's happening in terms of treatments and what. And then the last thing you may just want to, if you're Googling, between Pinterest, between blogs. I mean, that's where a lot of people are trading information informally. And, you know, I learned about this first through the IEP system for kids who have disabilities, that parents are posting information about, here's a tip that I used to get services here. Here's a tip that I used to get services here. And I'm learning more and more how they're using these social media sites for individuals to post and help one another. So it may be a great place to sort of look into and see if anyone has any experience with this and how did they get that therapy, and you know, what's the best way to advocate for it in your own backyard.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We actually here at the association can give you information for support groups, and that's where a lot of people find, you know, doctor recommendations, neuropsychs, you know, even, you know, in addition to emotional support. It is a great way to get those additional resources that you're looking for, you know, very informally, and, you know, also meet people that are going through similar experiences as you are. So it's definitely something that everyone should, you know, look into if you're looking for more. So let's see, we have a few more questions. Is Tricare a benefit for retired Guard personnel? If so, when will that person be eligible?
I don't know, because the Guard is sort of this mix of, it's not really, it's more of a state-based. I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out and get information back to Bridget by Monday.
Okay.
If they want to follow up, I'll get you information by Monday on that.
Okay, so for the person who asked the Guard question, just follow up with an email to me, and I will definitely be in touch with you about that. And we have one more question. Do you know if there are any caps to the cognitive therapy, or if it's simply based on a medical need?
Do you know, it's going to be based on, I'm thinking, on a medical need, because it's really brand new that they're even willing to consider it. So this document is from March 2013. It's the first time they're even admitting that cognitive therapy works for individuals and veterans. So I suspect they're, because of the cost involved, they are recommending it as little as they can, unless people are really advocating. So I don't think they're going to completely turn around and say, well, we never believed in this before, but now we've been mandated to believe in this, and we're going to believe in it a lot. So I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, definitely. And we actually have
and you're never going to see them, you know, put into a, you know, a nationally publicized document. And we're willing to give this many hours. No, you're not going to see them being willing to grant that.
And we have one final question before we close up. You stated that injured vets can access services through the New York Brain Injury Waiver. Can you elaborate on how they assess this system? This individual is from Pennsylvania and is wondering if their vets in their state could also qualify.
Well, it's really, the programs are a state-by-state program. The interesting thing about New York is it's almost easier to get on New York Medicaid than almost any other Medicaid system in any other state, because there's not a long-term residency requirement. You could literally cross over the New York State line, rent a place, and say, I'm a New York resident, give me Medicaid. And then once you're on Medicaid and qualify for Medicaid generally, that's when you can apply for the New York Traumatic Brain Injury Waiver. So I'm more familiar with that program because I'm in New York, and this is the program that I've been working with. So if you're in Pennsylvania, and if you are, you'd have to go through the Pennsylvania Department of Health to see what waiver programs are available, and if there is a specific one for Pennsylvania. If it's not, occasionally it is worth moving to a different state to get better services. Because really, New York is far more comprehensive with many of these than other states. And they're more generous in terms of the amount of assets you're permitted to keep. So if someone is in Pennsylvania, if they're in, often when I'm dealing with seniors and they want to cross over and go move to Connecticut, Connecticut attorneys will say, no, head right back to New York. You had the opportunity to have far more covered under Medicaid in New York than Connecticut will pay for. So you're going to have to go through the Department of Health, look at the websites there, see what's available through their system. And if you're not finding that it's going to cover or really have sort of the robust services, then you may consider moving to New York. They don't let you pre-plan though. You can't say, okay, I've got a service provider, I've got the agency, I've got Medicaid in place in New York, now I'm moving over. You have to move here first and then start the application process. Unfortunately, that's just a little hiccup with the logistics.
Yeah.
But you don't have to wait 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or a year. Roll across the border, you're a resident on that day.
Well, great. That looks like it was our last question, so I think that's going to conclude our webinar presentation. I want to thank Kim for her fantastic presentation, and I hope that you all found it as informative and educational as I did. And I want to thank all of you for participating. Please spread the word about our monthly webinars. Again, we have lots of wonderful resources, so please don't hesitate to ask about them. If you have any questions that weren't answered, please send them to me. I know Kim would be delighted to answer them for you. And thank you, everyone, again, and have a wonderful day. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks for inviting me. It was
No.
a pleasure.